Okay, we are live. Let me just make sure everything is appearing as it should. And we are live, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you're at. We're about to be in just a moment live, not only in YouTube, but on Virgin Most Powerful Radio in just a few seconds. So be very patient. Few seconds, audience, and we're going to be live talking about a topic you all love talking about, the papacy, Pope Vigilius, the so-called controversy of Vigilius. So just a few moments, you'll hear that music.
The story you are about to hear is true.
Catholic commentary. Spiritual warfare. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Jesus 911.
And audience, we are live and we are ready to talk about all things papacy, in particular Pope Vigilius. I am joined by the master himself, the Reverend Dr. Kappes. Today we're going to be talking about Pope Vigilius. A lot of you all requested this the last time we were on. Very encouraging seeing people love talking about this topic. Isn't that right, Reverend Dr. Kappes?
Yeah, I am really excited to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me, and it's great to see how many people want to learn about this topic. I am always happy to be here as sort of a private consultant, and let's move on.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So what would you say is really the big deal when it comes to Pope Vigilius? You hear his name get brought up all the time. It's kind of like one of those so-called zombies, as our near and dear brother Gary says. You may hack him down, you may hack the argument down, but it rises up again eventually. So what is the deal? What is this controversy?
Well, I think that there can be two. The one that almost everyone who hears about him is a controversy from the Eastern Orthodox. That's the major group today, which would be something like the Russians or the Greeks. And their major issue with Vigilius is this is going to turn out to be a really cool, strange thing today. Very strange.
Yeah.
They don't know the documentation. The attempt is to claim that Vigilius is not an example of papal infallibility because he is a they used to call it a waffler, a waffle. Mm-hmm. He waffles like a politician. He says A and then he says not A. Basically, he says this ancient bishop Theodore of Mopsuestia is condemned, but then he reverses him. Or he reverses himself and he says, no, he's not condemned. And then a third time he reverses himself and he says condemned. So the idea is that Vigilius has reversed himself officially 3 times. As we're going to find out, that very typical Eastern Orthodox apologetic story is not accepted by an ecumenical council of the first millennium, the Constantinople III, or what is called the Sixth Ecumenical Council. And to adopt that story is for an Eastern Orthodox to go against the solemn judgment of an Eastern Orthodox council, which calls Saint Vigilius thus a saint, and says any of the people that say these things about Vigilius are basically bashing the name without any justification of Vigilius. That's going to be the first thing that'll be pretty cool. The second thing that we've seen more recently, you and I, William, has been the fact that Oriental Orthodox, now this is a group that is the smaller group that represents maybe about 60 million Christians in the world. The major countries would be something like Ethiopia or something like Egypt. They're going to claim that papal infallibility is contestable or is contradicted by the fact that Vigilius condemned or rather failed to condemn a person justified at Chalcedon by the name of Ibis which I don't expect too many people to know. But here's what we'll just say. Ibis is just a guy that says nasty things about St. Cyril of Alexandria. And the idea here is Vigilius is not infallible because he gets this whole story wrong. So we're going to address both of those. I did see a request for a
Yes, I
prayer.
just saw that. Yes, and thank you, James, for your support. He says, "Laudetur Jesus Christus. May the Lord give thee peace." He says, "Hi, Father. Is there any Byzantine Catholic prayer for the Roman Pontiff?" Let's start the show with the Byzantine prayer as usual. And of course, he's got to greet me as hi Poopy. I'm not aware of any Byzantine, but of course, you would be the expert in that. Are you aware of any?
I am going to read from the official, we'll call it divine office or breviary of the Orthodox Church and the Byzantine Catholic churches. And
Wonderful.
this is on the feast of Saint Sylvester, and it's actually a hymn in honor of the Pope and his infallibility.
Wow.
So, yeah, most people don't know this. I've actually got a study that eventually I'm going to put out that shows that the feast of Saint Sylvester is the most ancient document that I can thus far find, whether in the East or the West, which uses the word infallibility and it applies it to a Pope.
Tremendous.
So, yeah, pretty neat. So let's listen to this. This is actually a hymn written by Saint Joseph, the hymnographer, I believe, in the 9th century, if my memory serves me correctly. It's been a while since I've done this study, and I translate it here. So, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. O Pope Sylvester, you appeared as a pillar of fire, sacredly leading the Holy Assembly, and as a cloud overshadowing it, bringing the faithful out of the delusion of Egypt and leading them into the divine land through your infallible teachings. Therefore, we honor your all sacred memory. Amen.
Amen.
So I bet you got
Fantastic.
more than he bargained for there. Nobody ever points to that.
Nobody does. That's tremendous.
No,
Whenever he
yeah,
hears
I've got
that,
a whole
he's
study
gonna
out
love
on that. Yeah, I'm eventually going to have to publish that. I discovered that actually the papal life of Saint Sylvester that was written maybe in the 5th century was translated into Greek, and then it was wholesale adopted into the office of Saint Sylvester by, we'll call it the Orthodox Church. I mean, for us, it's the Eastern Catholic Church, but the Orthodox Church around the time of Photius, the famous Photius of the Phocian Schism, Saint Photius the Great, and that office was meant to exemplify the infallibility of the papal office because it rejected Photius, and it enshrined Saint Ignatius, Patriarch of Constantinople,
Right.
as the true and legitimate leader of the Byzantine Church. And so an entire office was composed in honor of Saint Sylvester to show the triumph of Rome's judgments over the resistance of Photius. And that's actually enshrined in the Orthodox breviary right now. So that's the backstory. So how do you like that prayer?
I love that. I love that. And our near and dear friend, John Colarafi, says the Manian does talk about the unerring teachings of Saint Sylvester.
Yeah. Now, what John may have not seen is a study. I think mine is the first of its kind. If not, I better get my act together before I publish this. What he may not realize is that it's actually quoting from the medieval forgery called the Acts of Saint Sylvester, which eventually becomes the donation of Constantine.
Wow.
So we've got a long line of documents that are behind that office. And then it's St. Joseph, the hymnographer, who is a supporter of St. Ignatius in Constantinople, who uses this documentation as his basis for writing the entire liturgical office.
Amazing. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Great points. Yeah. Now, should we tackle this one, or did you have somewhere else to another?
Hey, you take me where you want to go.
Let's do this, James. An audience, to remind you, any and all of your questions. Maybe you have particular ones. We want to hear from you. James Tay, thank you for the support. Said, Father, did Vigilius not try to bind the whole church to believe in heretical documents? Why then do we Catholics still believe in papal infallibility? Playing a little
Yeah,
devil's
actually,
advocate.
yeah. I've actually got 2 full articles that have been unpublished on this. William has, of course, access to them. He had to pay me handsomely for them. But yeah, so the first document. So here's the false history. This opens up what I wanted to talk about. Vigilius is accused of having written some documents called. We're going to call it Judicatum 1. So I'm going to write that up.
Yep.
I'm going to call it Judicatum 1. This is for the people that follow this stuff. You've probably heard of Richard Price and his Constantinople 3 very large study. This is mentioned in there, so he's probably the best historian on this when it comes to the real documents. And in there, Richard Price, as a historian, which is a perfectly fine thing to do as a historian, wants to privilege Justinian, who is the emperor fighting with Vigilius in the, let's call it 550s, the 550s. And Justinian, as the emperor in the 540s, got Vigilius elected. And one of the conditions Justinian tells us that got Vigilius elected was Pope Vigilius had to promise that he was going to condemn this dead bishop, Theodore Mopsuestia. Okay. And he reversed himself when he actually put pen to paper several years later. Vigilius put his finger up in the air and was like, "Oh, wow, the wind's blowing in a different direction." And so this is the accusation. The Latin-speaking Christians of the empire did not want to condemn Theodore of Mopsuestia, who wrote some really nice liturgical commentaries and some other stuff. He had died as a bishop in communion with the church. He had a good reputation amongst his own faithful before he died. Now, the problem with him was he had a very weak Christology, we would call a low Christology. But we'll get back to that, it sounds like, after the break. Is that
Definitely. Yeah, that is correct. That is the sound of the first break. We're going to leave you in a little bit of a cliffhanger, audience. We will definitely get back to you in just a moment. Stick around. We got a lot more to come, and we're tackling any and all of your questions. All righty, we're in a break. People on YouTube can still see us. So the people on YouTube, we see you all have great questions, including yours, Father Z. We will tackle yours as well. You all have been having some great ones. And I love seeing that people are excited to learn about Pope Vigilius. This is fun.
Yeah, I didn't realize that this. I didn't realize this would be such a huge topic. But I guess it must have become like one of these celebrated topics. Like, how do we deal with this apparent contradiction?
Yeah, it definitely has been. And I know there are plenty others in particular. I know that the other two very famous ones, and people will definitely probably request those as well. I know, the Honorius one is a pretty popular one. And then, of course, another one that has gained a lot of steam in the present day, which back when I first began doing this, you didn't hear a lot about it. You hear a lot about it now, is Pope Liberius.
Yes. I've done some work on Liberius as well.
You have.
So,
I know you have. Yeah. I'm surprised.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Probably more because of what Protestants try to make out of it.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Now seeing other people hopping on the Liberius train, I kind of thought that was I always thought that was a weaker Protestant argument back in the day.
Yeah, I think the real difficulty when we talk about Liberius is we don't have a document that he signed.
Right.
We don't have a statement from a pope or a council condemning him.
Exactly.
What we do have are some pretty heavy hitter authors like St. Athanasius and some others who admit, but they don't always agree with one another exactly.
Yep.
Either a larger or a lesser betrayal.
Yep.
And so it's the question of what was the degree of the betrayal.
Yeah, no,
And
you're
so
right.
Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
And we are back and we're live from the break. We left you all with a little bit of a cliffhanger. And yes, let's take it away. That was a great cliffhanger. It was great on Theodore and so much more. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we've got to move forward now. Now, Justinian, okay, accuses Vigilius of being a backslider. Vigilius publishes the first document that he's known for, which is sometimes called, let's call it the Constitutum. Is that how you know his first document, which is?
That is exactly how I know it.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's
Yep.
call it that, the Constitutum number 1. And it's there that he says, don't condemn dead people. He condemns 60 propositions, 60 ideas of Theodore that he considers to be erroneous, if not heretical. So he's willing to say this guy was not all that he was cracked up to be. In fact, he is a little embarrassing when it comes to knowing all his dogmas.
Mm-hmm.
But he died in good faith. He taught as a good guy. He didn't mean to be such a dummy on dogma, etc. But this enrages Justinian, which even leads to really kidnapping, in so many words, Vigilius, and really pressuring him to change his mind. What ends up happening, however, is that Justinian isn't just a brute. He is that, but he is also a very smart brute. He's probably one of the most educated people of that period. And he is a native Latin speaker. And what he does is he goes through all the documents of Augustine that have been presented to him by the North African bishops.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows in various writings that Augustine had a formal position that you could condemn people that died in the embrace of the church, in the bosom of the church, if you later found out that they had been doing heretical stuff. And so Augustine says, I wouldn't hesitate to condemn even a bishop if I found out later that he was in communion with heretics. Yeah. So what ends up happening is Justinian publishes these Augustinian documents, and Vigilius, under pressure and being bullied, reads the documents, and he sees that Augustine did hold this doctrine. So what happens? He writes a reversal of his position, but in this, he explicitly quotes Augustine, and he says, Augustine, our father in the faith, he ends up being declared a officially approved and almost, not quite, I mean, we can't dogmatically hold this, but if it were possible for someone to be infallible, we would think of Augustine being the closest guy to have a charism. So this is what the approved fathers of Justinian's council of Constantinople, they call these the approved fathers, the canonically approved fathers, that you're supposed to look to them and find agreement with them before you propose any of your own doctrines, right? So no individual father is infallible, but these are the most authoritative, the weighty ones. And Augustine is named explicitly in ecumenical council. So Vigilius says, well, now that I've seen that there's evidence of a previous father of the church, who we all reverence, actually condemning the dead when they've died in the bosom of the church, now I have a precedent, a legal precedent, to change the Holy See's judgment of defending the good name of the dead to condemning the good name of the dead. Now, notice here, there is a reversal then of his position. The interesting thing is, though, we know that we actually have an entire study out on all the works that Saint Vigilius, according to the Third Ecumenical Council of Constantinople, what Saint Vigilius, according to official council documents,
Right.
what he's using a bunch of documentation where he sees Pope Zosimus, his predecessor, changed his mind on the judgment of a particular person. We know from Eusebius's life and history of Saint Irenaeus and Pope Saint Victor that when Pope Saint Victor had new documents brought to his attention condemning we'll call them, because I saw a bunch of questions, this will be like a teaser, condemning a traditionalist liturgical group. He found out that there had been earlier documents that said you're allowed to keep your old rite and liturgical observations that I thought were really, really bad. He reversed himself. Based off of the new evidence that was presented by Irenaeus and others. So what we have is a whole series of papal reversals in canonical or trial matters. And what people don't get is that Vigilius is explicitly citing these, and he explicitly refers to Augustine's work called the Retractions. But he doesn't refer to Augustine's work where Augustine said, I committed a dogmatic error in abstract belief, and now I'm reversing myself and embracing the Orthodox faith. That Augustine had two levels of error. One was a dogmatic error, but the second level was what is called an interpretation error, where because he didn't get the Hebrew right, or he didn't get the Greek right, or he found out that there was more information by more documents, he reversed his opinion on a very particular matter, which was not essential to the dogma of the faith, but he still corrected himself. Vigilius actually, in his second letter, makes the explicit appeal to Augustine, and he says, I'm doing the same thing Augustine did on these matters in which new information has come to my mind, and I'm reversing myself. And why did Vigilius feel like he could do that without challenging papal infallibility? Because he knew from a collection of documents that still exist, and we still have them, and there's been studies done on them. I'm happy to make this available as a word. You can look it up. It's called the Collectio Aveliana.
Oh, yeah.
And in that collection, what we see is it's a whole collection of papal reversals on particular judgments against people. And so the thing that Vigilius didn't have, he didn't have a legal precedent to talk about judgments against dead people. All the people that had been reversed were people that were still living. How do we reverse judgments on dead people? That was considered a new kind of trial. Like, he's not there to defend himself. He can't answer any questions. Of course, some of us know about a little bit later that somebody dug up a dead pope and tried to do that, and I doubt he answered very many questions.
No.
So, so at any rate, what we see then with the Vigilius case is this. Vigilius did not consider himself, nor did he consider the topical matter of an individual trial of a dead person to be at issue. What he considered to be at issue was whether or not there was a legal precedent to take a person who had already died, who could not go through the typical legal process of Roman law and defend himself and face his accusers and these sorts of things, and to bypass that process and to besmirch his name when he had no one to defend him, namely himself. And the answer from Augustine ended up being yes. And so the actual document by Vigilius, called the Constitutum number 2, is a reversal.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, what's the most interesting part, to answer this final question so we can get to more, is when 130 years later, an accusation came up that is similar to Eastern Orthodox today to say that Vigilius was a heretic. He held a position which is now condemned by the Second Ecumenical Council. The fathers of that council, who were all, for the most part, were all Greek. It was, yes, there were Latin legates there, but for the most part, they were all Greek, and they were all Constantinopolitan. They were all from the city of Constantinople.
Mm-hmm.
They looked through all the documentation, and this is, again, in Richard Price's version of the story. which he has in that same volume I've already quoted to you, they came up with the conclusion that no, we've looked through all the documents and there's nothing to incriminate Vigilius. We judge officially as an ecumenical council that Vigilius is not only free from heretical error, but he died a saint.
Wow.
And basically, that is the official position of both the Orthodox and of the Roman Catholic churches, that Vigilius committed no heresy and no errors. Now, a historian like Richard Price is going to say, yeah, but there's this evidence out there that is really, really suspicious, really, really suspicious. And that is a good thing for Richard Price to do, to say, if I am a historian and all I have is a small representation of surviving documents, can I confirm as a historian or can I deny Vigilius? And Price's position as a historian isn't, this is all a lie made up by the Third Ecumenical Council. It's
right.
Documents that survive now suggest that the Third Ecumenical Council may actually be exaggerating. Maybe they even faked some stuff. Maybe they even did some undue process. But that is a historian trying to give a fair reading to both sides and coming up based off of his instincts and his knowledge of all the texts, what his best guess is. A best guess of a historian does not reverse a canonical decision by the Holy See, which is the Third Ecumenical Council, whose acts were approved by the Pope and who are now binding, according to Pope St. Agatho, on the church, and they're obviously binding for the Orthodox churches. So really, this controversy is a controversy that has been resurrected, it seems to me, as best as I can tell. I don't know the apologetics world that well. By Eastern Orthodox who have not actually, they don't have access to an English version of all the acts of Constantinople III. In this article, I've actually reproduced those passages and translated them. The nice thing is with AI and Google now is you can take, if you can figure out where those pages are in Mind's Patrologia Graeca or Mansi's ecumenical councils, you can have it translate it for you and see it with your own eyes, because those translations are getting pretty darn good.
They really are. They're getting pretty good. I have seen that firsthand. They're getting really, really good. And I know we've got about 20 seconds before we hit another break. So with that in mind, I see we've got some great questions coming in. We'll leave you all on that particular cliffhanger, because one particular question we see that came in is a tremendous one from the brother James. And James Tay, God bless you, brother, for your support. And we're going to leave you with this cliffhanger, audience, because we're going to hit a break and then we're going to be back. He wants to know, well, hold on, why does the Church of Rome not venerate Liberius as a saint, but the Copts and the Byzantines, apparently schismatics, they venerate him as one? Now, this is another question we do see come up a lot lately. So that's a great one. And we're about to hit a break in a few seconds. We want to keep you all at the edge of your seats. Don't go anywhere, audience. Don't go anywhere, faithful. We will be back in just a moment. Alrighty, the YouTube faithful, you guys, we hope you're enjoying it, guys and gals. Let us know, give us feedback. So the Liberius zombie seems to be back.
And how when's the last time that you formally had to deal with Liberius, William?
Formally, it's got to be probably in a debate multiple years back. But now I am having to deal with Liberius questions a whole lot more. They appear on radio or when I do my afternoon or evening show. So it's becoming much more common. Liberius is becoming something that gets brought up often.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, the people that mention him are Athanasius of Alexandria and Hilary of Poitiers.
Yep.
And they both acknowledge in slightly different language that he did do something that was kind of naughty, but Athanasius kind of forgave him immediately.
He
I'm not
does.
sure I can't remember what Hilary's words were. Do you?
Hilary, I don't remember off the top of my head. Athanasius forgives him. And, at the end of the day, there's just really no possible way to know what it was that he signed.
Mm-hmm.
We can ascertain that the fathers were not happy with
Right.
whatever it was that he signed. We can ascertain that. But yeah,
Some of the testimony, and there are more than those two. I think there's a total of like 4.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
there's more than those.
Yeah. Some of them claim that it's ambiguous, and others that it's heretical. So we don't have a unanimous consent of what he actually did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the big thing. That's the big deal there. If we actually had the actual document that we could look at, that'd be something else.
Mhm.
But we don't have it,
Yeah. And what we can say contextually is if you study Arianism, what you'll oftentimes find, and we can repeat this on the show,
Sure.
what you'll oftentimes find is that these so-called semi-Arian synods, they weren't guilty of saying something heretical. What they tried
Right.
to do was they tried to say homoousios isn't scripture, and there's a heretic that once used that term. All the creeds we're going to put together are only going to be creeds that are based off of Bible language. The
Right.
problem with Bible language is you don't have any more distinctions than the Bible makes. And if the Bible doesn't make those distinctions, then you need to use human reason.
Yep. 100% right. And we are back, audience. I see some tremendous questions that have come in. You all have been asking some great ones. And James says, well, hold on. Why does the Church of Rome not venerate Liberius as a saint, but the Copts and the Byzantines, apparently the schismatics, do venerate him as one? How do we answer that particular charge?
Well, I am myself not aware of, I've not seen a Byzantine calendar of Saint Liberius, and I've not seen a Coptic one, but I'm going to suppose that that's true because I'm simply not aware of it. But let's suppose that that's true. That local calendars can add their own saints has always been allowed by the church.
Yep.
The question is, have they been officially added in editions that have been published by the Holy See?
Yeah.
Whether that is the Latin Rite, for example, the Latin version of the Roman Missal that we use today in almost all the churches of the world,
Yep.
or the Byzantine Rite as published in the Vatican presses, etc. So Liberius, we don't have any difficulty with being a saint because Athanasius, who was the person most offended by Liberius at least being wishy-washy, he did not stay stalwart supporter, a almost martyred supporter of Athanasius. He kind of gave up resisting when he was. I always make the joke to when I have taught at Catholic seminaries. I always make the joke that the way to break a man's will is to send him to Romania, apparently, because that's where they sent Liberius. Yeah,
Right.
You go to Romania and you're willing to sign anything. So hopefully we don't have any Romanians here. So apparently he was sent to exile in Romania, and it was there that after a lot of hardships that the emperor got him to sign something. Athanasius forgave him because Athanasius, apparently from his perspective, saw that Liberius did his best up to that point and out of weakness signed. That's the speculation. But it's other fathers of the church and what we call ecclesiastical writers, people that aren't saints of the church, but they are good. They provide us what is considered evidence worthy of consideration. So out of the 4 or 5 writers like St. Athanasius and St. Hilary, we don't have a consistent story. Some of them just say he signed something that's more or less ambiguous, which is negative, but others say that he actually betrayed the faith. And so the question is, which version of the story, which is a history report, not a dogma, not a conciliar decree, not a papal letter that gives a judgment on the matter, which historian or writer that's talking about a historical rumor is the right one, or any of them the right one? Do they all get it wrong? Was it actually just propaganda by the emperor? This is the problem that we can't solve. The most likely thing is, from a historian's point of view, which is not a Catholic dogmatic point of view, is that Liberius did something at least questionable, if not offensive. Anything you'd like to add to that, Dwayne?
No, that was great. And I agree. I mean, that's the most that we can postulate in that particular point. No, I completely agree. I do want to thank AB. AB, God bless you. Thank you for your support. He says, God bless, and may the precious blood wash over you all, rendering all evil dumb, deaf, and blind. Our Lady of Sorrows, hold us under the mantle of your protection. AB, God bless you, my friend. Thank you so much for your support, brother. And I see a tremendous question from Father Z. By the way, Father Z, this is a great one. And lately, I know Father Z has been encountering a lot of Orthodox objections. So this is a good one, Father Z. Thank you for your support. He says, hold on, there's an Orthodox objection. If Christ gave the authority to all the apostles, as we see in Matthew 18:18, and the early church recognized several apostolic seats, major three, why are the keys understood as belonging uniquely to Peter and to Rome?
Did you want to start out with this one, William, since I've been hogging all the
Yeah,
time?
I'll give a just a brief one. And one thing that I think is very important is showing the connection between, you look at Isaiah 2 and Matthew 16, and when we show that connection briefly, we can see that without a doubt there is that biblical basis. And then I'll let the tremendous Reverend Dr. Kappes follow up. But when you look in the Bible in particular, the connection is one of the strongest. In Isaiah 22, you have Shebna being replaced by Eliakim. And God gives Eliakim the key of the house of David. We read, I will place on his shoulder the key of the house of David. He shall open and none shall shut. He shall shut and none shall open. So I want to remind you all, the office was that of the royal steward or the chief minister. He would exercise the king's authority. We see that language carried over into Matthew 16, the Gospel of St. Matthew, where Jesus, the Davidic king, is echoing this passage when he says to Peter singularly, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So just to get us started, and then I'll let you take it away, the parallels are there. You have the kingdom of David, you have the kingdom of heaven, you have the key of the house of David, keys of the kingdom. That language of the royal steward language of Isaiah 22 is directly being echoed by our Lord to St. Peter as the Christ's chief steward. And that authority to open and shut is the authority to bind and loose in the New Testament for St. Peter. The imagery is very clearly deliberate. Just as the Davidic king appointed a chief steward to govern in his name, well, our Lord, the Son of David, is appointing St. Peter to exercise that unique governing authority in his church.
Well, I'm going to pick up from William right here. And what William has emphasized is that there is two uses of the keys. One is a special key, which is the Davidic key. And that is apparently a governing key of a particular sort. And it is in an office which has successors. And then we look at Matthew 18 and notice that the power in Matthew 18 is a forgiving sins power. And so this is common to all the apostles in Matthew 18:27. It's a binding and loosing power. A lot of commentators on scripture, whether Protestant or Catholic, are going to emphasize that rabbis have this idea of binding and loosing sins, which is kind of making judgments about individuals' situations on whether a law applies to them or not. So this would also be a question of jurisdiction, which is also shared with the Pope. So here so far, what we have is indeed a common jurisdiction that is shared between them. And in fact, what we see is that even other people in Acts of the Apostles, like Matthias, can be added to this group. So there is a common sense in which this is used. The problem becomes trying to connect Matthew 18:18 to that key of David, that governing power, which is unique, and you can't get there from Matthew 18. We do deal with this in a book that we put together on the papacy. Yeah, I would say that pretty much then what we're dealing with is that. Now, the earliest, let's call it ancient documents that we have to deal with are something like the apostolic constitutions. These are probably written in the 200s. They say this about the passage: teach as having authority to judge them that sin, for to you bishops it is said in the gospel, quote, that which ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, end quote. Notice Matthew 18:18 is Jesus addressing only the bishops, meaning the first 12 apostles, and that it's about sin, just exactly as we would expect with rabbis. Whereas Jesus is actually talking about a different power, not just binding and loosing sins. The passage goes on, but bishops shall reign over soul and body to bind and loose with heavenly power. So this is really about the jurisdiction that's common, not about the charism that is unique to Peter. And that's the distinction that I would make.
Great point. I think that's a great, tremendous distinction. And yes, hopefully that was helpful. Audience, you let us know, what do you have on your mind? Was that helpful? I thought that was really, really good. And there is another question, and we still have at least 2 minutes before the break, so we're gonna tackle this one. The brother James, and God bless you, James, says, is it possible to accept, quote unquote, papal authority, yet defy the Pope like the SSPX do? Why do so many people try to do mental gymnastics to explain that the SSPX aren't excommunicated? Seems a little illogical. So can one accept papal authority and defy the Pope like they do? What are your thoughts?
Well, one of the questions that's being asked is, we could answer this way: have there been historical examples of groups or individuals who end up being good people that had a dispute with the Pope? And the answer is yes. And there are those situations. One of them that I'm actually looking at these days is very interesting. It is a group of Dominicans, a very famous theologian by the name of John of Naples. Yeah, and everybody's like, John of who? John of Naples. Yeah, he's a Dominican. He's a Thomist, and he resisted what is admitted to be a erroneous and now heretical position of Pope John the 22nd. Pope John the 22nd tried to deny that people that are saints who die and don't go to purgatory, he tried to deny that they see God, that they have basically to wait until the final resurrection to get the beatific vision. Now, John of Naples was a Dominican who knew that that was not the constant teaching of the church from the sources and from where the church had developed its theology. And so he argued forcefully for that, but he also resisted the Pope in other ways. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. That doesn't mean that it's the right decision to make. It just means, do we have examples?
Yes, great point. James, we're going to continue diving deep into that on the other side of the break. And I see some other tremendous questions. Repent before too late. Yours is great. We'll be tackling your questions in a moment. Don't go anywhere. These are some pretty tremendous questions. And that one on the keys is a really good one. This one's coming up very often a lot too.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a good one. It's coming up very often. And I think the answer that you provided was a very good one. I think a lot of the times the answers tend to lack that particular nuance, but that was that's a very good question that's been coming up lately. Father, thank you for your support. And I thank everybody for their support today. Yeah, that's what's been coming up. That's one of those that I think it's important to understand that Isaiah 22 connection, right?
Right. Yeah. And I'm just looking actually through our book now just to see. I tried to maximize my research into trying to find the strongest possible argument for Matthew 18:18. The strongest I think that we were able to come up for is that it does require a group of bishops for the Catholic Church. The Pope can't be the only bishop in the church.
Sure.
There's no way to read that passage that the church is a college of bishops. It's not just the Pope.
Right.
And I don't think that that's very controversial at all. But the other thing is, though, is that in no sense can we mistake the special nature of the keys that are given to Jesus in a type in Isaiah, with the
Right.
keys that he is explicitly using against Satan in Revelation, with the power to bind and loose. With the power to bind and loose. Power to bind and loose is a common power that even rabbis had. The keys to the kingdom, those are very specific in Jewish talk. Anything you want to add to that, William? Because I know that you have to actually debate all these things out.
Yeah, you filled in all the gaps. That was great. Yeah.
And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. Realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
And we are back, audience. We left you up on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and we're going to pick up right where we left it off. I believe you were talking about John the 22nd, if I'm correct.
Right. So what we want to try to solve is this question has two levels. Did good people find themselves in church history on the right side when they were resisting the popes? And historically, we gave some examples. Irenaeus did a soft resistance of the Pope and gave him some advice, and he listened. Now, we've seen that now John the 23rd or John the 22nd had the resistance from the Neapolitan that I've mentioned. And he also resisted him on governing matters, like trying to violate a constitution and impose new elections and these things are actually pretty common. The problem, so the question is, can you resist a pope and still really, really, really believe that he is the pope? And that's historically something that does happen quite often, right? It's a disagreement about principles, not a disagreement about the divine nature of the office. So that's the only answer that we're trying to give right now. That doesn't give a justification. Oh, I can do whatever I want because, I believe that there is a pope and that he's divinely appointed, but he's just, he's not the guy for me, or I think that his principles are bad or something like that. Now, the question here, though, the second part of the question is, why aren't the SSP excommunicated? That's a different kind of question, right? So that question is, do we have something called church law that is currently in effect? And the answer I would like to say is pretty obviously yes. We have canon law. And in fact, if many countries that you go to, if they're going to get involved with church stuff on a civil level, the Holy See has negotiated that church canon law is recognized, let's say, in the United States of America as its official laws that govern it as an organization, just like you would have Google or Apple or somebody governed by their internal laws, right? So canon law is quite clear that if somebody ordains as a bishop, another bishop, and they did not get a papal letter saying you can do that, that there is a legal right of the Pope by law to excommunicate that person, in the sense that the action itself presumes. This is what this whole fancy word is. I'm going to write it up. It's called late sententiae, which
that is a fancy word. Yeah,
it is a pretty fancy word. Basically, what it really means is when Pope Leo had the declaration kind of written out for him about the excommunication, Pope Leo and I think the writer was Cardinal Fernandez. They did not actually excommunicate. That would require them to say, okay, you were in a good situation and now you're in a bad situation by this letter. A
Yep.
late sententiae means if anybody, whosoever they are, as a bishop, a valid bishop, ordains another bishop and they didn't get a papal letter saying you can do it first, what ends up happening is by the law itself, they're already presumed and legally treated as an excommunicated person, okay? So what that means is you need to actually go to trial and show that you're an exception to the rule. You see what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Now, you may say, well, I know that there was this guy in Alaska who secretly ordained this other guy, and there were no witnesses, but it was a bishop, and he ordained this other guy to be bishop. Technically speaking, what the law says is, even though the only people that know about that are you and the two bishops, because you were the only witness there, that ordaining bishop in Alaska who ordained the other guy in secret, they're already excommunicated. The
Yeah.
only thing that will happen is if somebody has photos and whatever letters exchanged and they send them to the Holy See can determine if it wants to declare that publicly, like let everybody know that the excommunication has taken effect. So this is what we're getting into. And again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the church. I'm not invited here by the Catholic Church. Think of me as a private scholar giving a private so-called layman's opinion. I'm not representing any curia or canon law society that is approved by Rome. I am understanding this as I read as a scholar the documents. Okay, so it is up to the church in the office of the Pope and in the office of the legal curia offices to make these legal determinations. They're the only ones that have the authority to do that. But I believe that I'm giving a fair reading as a scholar of these ideas. And so the final answer to your question is everyone who believes the church has laws that are in effect, which I think is me, I think it's William, I think it's
Yep.
probably just about anybody listening here.
Yep.
Maybe if you live in, I don't know, Iran, and you only think that there is Islamic law, obviously you don't think that there's anything to this church law stuff. But
Right.
for those of us who accept that there is a church and the church can make laws and those laws are valid, the presumption of the law is that if you do this action, you're already excommunicated. And the only thing that the Holy See is doing is actually stating it as a warning to everyone that this has already happened.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I think that is the reason why this is somewhat confusing, is there are those kinds of excommunications in canon law. I can't remember the exact number of late sententia. I want to say it's something like 4 or 6 that exist now in the entire code of canon law. I am not a canon lawyer. I do not represent the Catholic Church. I am a private scholar who is telling you how I read the documents. Okay.
Yeah, great answer. Tremendous one. And great question as well from James. Thank you all, everyone, for your support. And repent before too late, who still has a haunted photo of me as I'm glad he's the only one that has it. Has every papa been canonized a saint? Has there been a pope who was up for sainthood and that was rejected?
Well, certainly the first answer is no. Have you ever been challenged on the second one, William?
I have not. But it got me when I saw that one come in. I began diving in and doing a little bit of research right now, earlier when it came in. But I am not aware of any pope that was up for sainthood and then that cause just fell apart. I am aware of there was a cause introduced for Pope Benedict XIII that I was aware of, but it never reached that level of, eventually seizing to an advanced level before full-on canonization. But I'm not aware of any that has maybe some that maybe stall and take a long time, but I think that would be different from one being up for sainthood and then just being flat out rejected. I'm not aware of any such case like that.
No, and we should also remember that there's probably a lot of technicalities. I've not actually looked through the technicalities of canonization of saints. Basically, I do know the process because I've known some people, even in my own home, where I'm from,
Yeah.
who have promoted these cases, and they just tell me about their experiences as being promoters. You, as kind of in a lawyer way, have to argue the merits of your case. You have to say, well, here's why the person was holy. Here's the person's writings, and I'm arguing to an official in the Roman Curia in the causes of saints, who is listening to me argue why they're holy and why their writings are orthodox. And then if there are any mistakes or discrepancies, you can show that there was no intention by that individual to do anything else than what the church wanted.
Yep.
And then lastly, you at least have to get a miracle in there ordinarily somewhere that can
Yep.
be plausibly explained only by the intercession of this person. And it's after that that you go through, at least in the past, you went through about 2 to 3 stages. I think there may have been a reform more recently where you only have to go through 2 stages. And effectively, what happens is that you go through that trial process. So let's say you get hung up. That could be taken as a rejection. Like you can't move the case forward. So I know that Fulton Sheen's case was in limbo for years.
Hmm.
They couldn't move it forward. Not exactly a rejection. It just says the evidence is insufficient. We can't move forward with the case.
Correct.
What I don't know if there is, I don't even know if there is a rejection letter. I don't know if you like get this rejection letter that says your guy is a really, really horrible candidate. He's never going to get it. Never call us again. Right.
That could be the case.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would imagine if you put somebody up there that's really silly, it would be one of those, we are all dumber for having read your proposition kind of letter you'll get back that'll be angry from an official that you wasted his time. But
Right.
Right. But to my knowledge, there is no rejection letter. Now, again, I am not a canon lawyer and I have not promoted something in the causes for saints. I only know indirectly from people that have. Okay.
Great point there. And the first answer was a great one. There's no doubt that not every pope has been canonized as a saint, but those are good questions. All of your questions today, faithful, has been tremendous. And we're about a minute right before we conclude on live radio. We're about a minute. So I do want to say, Reverend Dr. Kappes, this has been tremendous. This has been amazing. And I want to thank everyone for their amazing support. Let them know that, hey, if they want more papacy stuff, definitely stuff like Honorius and other stuff, that could definitely be a possibility, right?
Yeah. We do have those articles, and it kind of depends on what you want us to do with them. We could eventually kind of put them together because they're more like very, very complicated note taking right now.
Yes,
we should probably release them as a small study, if not a book. Books take too long. Maybe a small study would be actually better. Kind of like that upcoming study on child communion.
Oh yeah.
So yes, something like that, and that would give people all the information they need and an easy way to read the whole controversy.
Absolutely. Audience, you all have been tremendous. We cannot wait to be back with you, and we will be back again soon. Everybody, don't go anywhere. There's more programming going on here on Virgin, most powerful radio. We will see you again soon. God bless you, everyone.
Saint Faustina.
All right, we're off the air. I usually like to continue like about half an hour more.
Sure,
You're
sure.
good with that? Okay, yeah.
Wonderful.
So, audience, any questions you all have, send them in. We'll tackle them. One thing that I wanted to pick your brain on in a very respectful manner. I got a lot of Eastern Orthodox moderators and near and dear friends. We love them dearly, our Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters. One thing that has been coming up recently, and I thought it was quite interesting, considering later on down the line we have that little short book on paedo communion where we very clearly we favor that. But one thing that I've been hearing lately is that the issue of paedo communion is a giant divider between Eastern Orthodox and Catholic, and that is another proof for Eastern Orthodoxy. And I think people tend to not realize, and not everyone that says this it means it in a malicious way, but I think people may not realize that we've got Eastern Catholic churches that give paedo communion. But with that in mind, do you think it'd be possible if the Latin Rite would ever return to that kind of practice?
It was considered actually after the Second Vatican Council with the reform of the liturgy. The real problem was that we have an institutionalized catechetical system that the Eastern churches don't have. And that means there's a preparation that was recommended by the Council of Trent so people understand what they're receiving. And then after the Council of Trent, meaning in the 1600s and 1700s, they thought, you know what, there may be a good reason to also prepare them for confirmation. So they started delaying the age of confirmation as a rule to be old enough to get instruction. So that now I've just told you that's the 1600s, right? For those two sacraments.
Yeah.
So now we have at Vatican II nearly 400 years of having an educational system where you always, as a matter of education, first give instructions by the parish priest to children before they receive, so they know it's special. And now you are asking all the bishops and all the priests to just come up with a new system. And that was the problem at Vatican II. Nobody had a good solution for a new system. So it wasn't even really seriously considered because none of the bishops were for just gutting the old system unless you can replace it with something.
Right.
Now, probably the pastoral experience right now that's creating some room to reconsider child communion is this. As more and more parents in many churches, in many countries, are just not sending their children to religious education, children are not receiving confirmation, and they're not receiving, what do you want to call it, First Communion at all before their marriages. Then the next time they come to church is for marriage. In that kind of pastoral situation, what do we have? The breakdown of the educational system.
Yeah.
And that is where you actually could see room for bishops saying, we need to get our people confirmed before marriage. Like, we also need them to get them back to church, but we want them, because they're getting married, we need them to have confirmation before marriage. So what if we start attaching it to baptism again? Now, there are some places actually in Spain, since we have Oriel, who seems to be a listener from Spain. I think Madrid gives it away. There are actually some dioceses in Spain. Now, I was led to believe they were islands, which means that they're probably very little known. But there were some dioceses in Spain that maintained child confirmation all the way up till Vatican II. Now, I don't know if they joined the rest of the country and they started to delay confirmation. But so the opportunity is, because the education systems are breaking down throughout the Western world, the bishops will eventually meet with each other and say, you know what, this education system isn't working in our country. We need something new. And that opens up the possibility of moving back the sacraments to baptism to make sure they get in before marriage.
And that is one thing that I have seen very, very commonly in the Latin Rite churches, especially around Texas. This is an issue that we're dealing with a lot. In particular, one thing we're dealing with a lot is over here, people are very excited. The Hispanic community as well, very excited to get their children to communion and first communion, and then after that, there's a massive drop off.
Yeah.
They don't return anymore to work towards confirmation,
Hmm.
and then some just never ever finish that process. And that's lamentable. It really is lamentable.
Right. And when I was growing up, there was still enough of a culture in the Midwest where probably maybe half of the parents still wanted their child to go to church and get confirmation up to about 14 or 16 when you had it. But began to notice when I was ordained and working in the early 2000s that that was starting to drop off. And now I wonder what percentage of parents care about confirmation. Like first communion, because you have a more of a party and it's kind of a big deal and it's like a social rite of passage. Like
Yeah.
that's still like important, but confirmation, like because there's not a lot of social importance in the United States to it, I've got to wonder if it's simply no longer like I kept seeing it multiply when I would prepare couples for marriages. More and more couples didn't have confirmation before marriage. And the
Wow.
problem became so serious between 1965 and 1983 that the new code of canon law from 1983 no longer absolutely requires confirmation for
Right.
marriage, which is kind of an admission that you can't always guarantee that a couple's going to have it in order to get married. So, yeah, that it's a pastoral problem. The Eastern solution solves one thing. They do get the sacraments. The thing it doesn't solve, and that they have their own problems that they're trying to solve pastorally, are how do we keep people in catechesis when they've gotten all the sacraments? Because in order to use the sacraments well, you have to know how to use them well.
Yeah. That is a very good question there. And yeah, I'm all for getting back to that, and of course, I prefer that particular model, and I think it would be a big time solution. I mean, do you think that would be a solution?
Um, I would be open to it, but I think it needs to be on a local level. It needs to be bishops have to determine for their own regions whether or not the old system is no longer functioning. And then they would have to go to the Holy See and say, these are our observation. Here is the evidence. Will you approve us locally going back to a really ancient practice to make sure that everybody gets the sacraments before they go into marriage, and even holy orders? I mean, you even have people that have to get confirmed before they go into seminary.
That is a good point. Really, really good point. I saw a question earlier. I believe it was Ari. She was
Hmm.
asking. Let's see where it is. An audience, any and all of your questions, send them in. Maybe you sent one earlier and I missed it because I don't know that the commercial breaks are really fast, and then I might have missed it. Ari was asking, when was the last time a pope was excommunicated?
That's a it's a it, yeah, I saw that earlier and I began to think on it.
Yeah.
The last that I know of by a bishop that was ordained within the Catholic Church for the Catholic Church
Hmm.
was at the Council of Florence,
Mm.
and this was a rival council called the Council of Basel.
Right.
It was initially convoked with the Pope's permission. He tried to transfer the rebellious bishops to uh, Ferrara, which is an Italian city, so he could keep a better eye on them
Hmm.
uh, and control the council more because they were getting kind of too big for their britches. Um, and what ended up happening was they reacted by not only saying, we defy you, but you're engaged in ecumenism with the Greeks at the Council of Florence.
Hmm.
And because of this ecumenical dialogue that you're in, you have betrayed the faith. You came up with these compromise formulas at the Council of Florence, and that proves that you're a heretic. and therefore we excommunicate you. And so the council actually excommunicated Pope Eugene IV on the basis of heresy. And if I can remember, it's been a while since I've looked at these documents. If I can remember correctly, the claims, it's that he went heretical by the document that he issued as a, in their words, a compromise formula between the Greeks and the Latins. Do you know of any more
Wow.
recent decrees of excommunication by a group of bishops or a bishop against a pope?
The only one that I can think of is, and it comes up very often. The only one that I can think of is the Cadaver Synod, where of course it doesn't stand in any way, but where Pope Formosus had his corpse. It was put on trial at that Cadaver Synod. But of course, these actions were later immediately overturned. It wasn't a valid excommunication. So, yeah. So I mean, I can't think of any valid ones.
Right. So this is, the one I'm giving is example of Catholic bishops who are at a Catholic ecumenical council, who did vote to excommunicate a pope. Of course, from the papal point of view, there is no, at that time, the canon law, we'll call it, the canon law that was in force was a book of canons called Gratian's Decretum. There are many, many canons in there, but none of them permit any bishop or group of bishops to issue a text excommunicating a pope. So according to the book that everybody was using for canon law at the time, they didn't have any basis for excommunicating the pope based off of church law. Now, if you say, well, did they have a historical precedent? A historical precedent? Not for a living pope. I'm not aware of a ecumenical council that explicitly issued a decree against a living pope. Now, were there any regional councils? There's two claims made by Richard Price. One is that the North African bishops excommunicated Pope Vigilius.
Right.
But I have not seen a decree. I wonder if it's a historical report or something like that. Maybe it's found in some sort of document. I have not seen the direct evidence for that. I'm sure that he has reasons for that. I just don't know if it's a primary text document or a historian who said so.
Right.
And of course, the problem with historians is, yes, that does constitute evidence, but in theology, that's the weakest form of evidence is a historical document. You need something like an account, conciliar decree, scripture, all the fathers who are approved to agree on an interpretation of scripture. These are the kinds of things that are weighty. So these are interesting questions, but and I think that there is an attempt to claim that not after Honorius. I wonder if there was a excommunication that was issued during the Acacian Schism that was in the 400s and early 500s that I'm trying to recall by Constantinople. There was also Photius the Great who issued an excommunication against, I believe it was it Pope Hadrian II? Would that have been who it was? Maybe.
I think it was Hadrian II. I think it was.
Yeah. That I believe actually we have documentation for. And he was a sitting ecumenical patriarch.
Right.
I don't think any excommunications were issued by any bishops after the Council of Florence against the Pope. So that's all I've got for you.
Which is a great answer. Either which way, it was a great one. And Sir Minimi, God bless you for your support, is asking, hold on, I thought all parishes required proof of the sacraments of initiation before you can be married. I know my parish does.
If your parish requires that documentation on a piece of paper, that may be true. Whether or not the canon law of the church requires it absolutely for marriage is another question. The 1983 Code of Canon Law does not require for a valid marriage confirmation.
You're
I would
100%
have,
correct.
yeah,
There's
I would
no, in
I would have
fact,
to check the USCCB if the United States Catholic bishops. I doubt they do, but if they have a special law
they
for the
don't.
United States that
No.
denies that pastorally allows them to prevent marriages based off of not having confirmation, but I am not aware of that, and that does not sound right to me.
It is not right. You're
Okay.
1,000% correct. That is, and if this parish requires it, it is not a strict rule. In fact, there is no parish anywhere near me that requires that.
Mhm.
My parish doesn't, and I, as being one that travels around to different parishes, it's a rarity. It's very rare
Now,
to even
the
encounter that.
code very strongly suggests that they
Yes,
be given some instruction and therefore the sacrament.
right.
And you'll find any diligent parish priest who will really try to get that confirmation done before the
No
marriage,
doubt.
right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, no, that's definitely correct. You're 100% right. TJ wanted to know: is a papal encyclical infallible? Is it binding?
Okay, so those are two different questions. Now we had the binding and loosing, which we talked about with Matthew 18:18, which is great. Does a papal encyclical, when it states things to be done, actions that should be done because they're good, or actions that should be avoided because they're evil? Or does when a papal encyclical say something is the church's official teaching, not necessarily infallible teaching, but official teaching? Are we supposed to obey that official teaching? It may not be a dogma. It may be a really strong theological opinion, right?
Mhm.
What would be a great example? A great example of a really strong theological opinion might be if a pope were to say, uh, "You are not allowed to condemn those who think John the Baptist was born without original sin,"
Mhm.
right? That
Yep.
does not exist, but that's not a dogma. That's just saying you can't morally start calling people bad names because they hold that John the Baptist was born without original sin. Okay,
Right.
so if that were in an encyclical, hypothetically, um, is it binding? And the answer is yes. Anything that seems to be actions to be done or actions to be avoided, or things that we must hold in our hearts, our minds, to be obedient Catholics, is an encyclical. But almost all encyclicals contain zero infallible statements. Almost
Mhm.
all. Now, does that mean all? It means no. What are we talking about percentage wise? I'll bet you if we went through a famous book called Denzinger, cited by two ecumenical councils as their
Yep.
main papal text, that means this is what ecumenical councils most recently, like to cite as previous papal and ecumenical council teachings. If you look at Denzinger and you say how many encyclicals cited in Denzinger, um, how many encyclicals cited in Denzinger have an infallible statement that is clearly infallible? If you told me 1%, I would believe that.
Mhm.
If you told me less than 1%, I'd still think it would be believable. Most of the time when we see infallible statements made by councils, it's in a decree of the council itself. And most of the time that we see decrees made by popes that are infallible, it's in special kinds of letters. And they are typically not encyclicals, because encyclicals are technically a letter that can be sent by any bishop. So Eastern bishops send encyclicals every year. And what the word encyclios means is a cycle that is an annual letter. So, for example, Athanasius oftentimes would send a letter out announcing in an encyclical what the major dates for celebrations were this year. When are we going to celebrate Easter this year, according to our official astronomer? When are we going to celebrate this feast day on the movable
Yeah.
calendar? So an encyclical is just a regular letter. It's not considered an extraordinary letter. It's considered the most ordinary way in which a bishop communicates, and it's passed around. It goes through a circle, both a circle in it's a regular thing that he publishes maybe annually, or it's a regular way of teaching. And so it's not considered by itself extraordinary teaching. He would have to say, even though this is my encyclical letter, I'm going to include this very, very special statement in here, and I'm going to highlight it by saying, I declare, decree, define that it is a matter of Catholic faith for everyone to hold XYZ. That would
Yeah.
be using a ordinary letter, but throwing into it something rather extraordinary. And I wouldn't be surprised if popes are very hesitant to do that. If they have something extraordinary to say, they want to put it into an extraordinary document.
Yeah. Great answer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm guessing Sir Minimi, he said, why not just make initiation mandatory? I'm guessing he means all of the initiation sacraments. And I located what you were referring to, Code of Canon Law 1983, and confirmation is not, you're correct, and I was correct, it is not a requirement, a canonical requirement to validly be married. It is not. It's Code of Canon Law 1065 from 1983. She's asking, why not just make it mandatory?
This is oftentimes something that we're used to with laws, right?
Yeah.
So we have this sense that if we live in a nation of laws, that you just make something a law and everybody obeys it. But can you think of laws that get put on the books and nobody bothers to obey them?
Yeah.
And probably in our local community, we know of examples, right? This is even more important for the church. The church no longer has a technical alliance with any particular country's government to enforce stuff. So, for example, when the Council of Trent made laws that changed sacramental practices or enforced sacramental practices, every Christian king would make that the national law for the Catholic Church in his kingdom, and then he would punish people for disobeying the law. He'd throw them in jail or fine them, or hit them with something, rather painful, torture them. Whatever it was that the king was going to do, he was going to do because it was the law. The Catholic Church now doesn't have that kind of coercive power of the law anymore. What they have is only the law of conscience. So if you say, oh, everybody should do this, well, first of all, you have to have all the bishops and the priests that understand equally well. It has to be a law so that they can all understand it. It's so simple, straightforward, and serious that they understand it, so they don't mess it up. They don't mess it up. The second thing is after you get, tens of thousands of bishops and priests on board, that they don't mess it up because it's so simple and straightforward and they all can be educated in a very short time on it. The second thing that you have to do is you have to do it in such a way that all the faithful are not going to revolt because they see that it's either something that is wise or not super inconvenient. So, imagine the church has the ability, let's say, to do a tithe. Let's say that all the churches of the world came out and said, if you're going to be a member of the Catholic Church, you have to show us your W-2s, your 1099s, whatever the equivalent is in Europe and various other countries. And you have to show us 10% of your income in order to be a member of the church and get buried in the church. What kind of revolt would that law cause? Not because people don't believe in God, because their entire lives, they have no idea that for many, many, many centuries, that was the obligation. Their only experience is, you just taxed me, and I've never been taxed before. My grandparents have never been taxed before. My mom's never been taxed before. This sounds like overreach. And then what you do is you get a rebellion, you get noncompliance, you get people leaving the church, and you're going to lose souls because there was no sense in which this is a wise law, or this is an explainable law, or this makes sense. So the real long answer to this question, maybe you were just hoping that it would be a short one. The real long answer to this question is because laws don't automatically lead to obedience, only if you have a way to make the law effective. And the church today, because it doesn't have coercive power, can only persuade you to obey the law for your own good. And until they find ways to persuade you for your own good to obey the law, and your own good means your eternal salvation, go to heaven, avoid hell, and for your earthly best case living, live happily in grace, not unhappily outside of the state of grace, right? Those are that's the closest thing to coercion of law that the church has. Now, for clergy, it has a little bit more coercion because it gives clergy salaries. And so it
Yeah.
can say, do this or you get fined.
Or
Or
else.
do this, or you like being in church and saying mass, you're going to have your faculties taken away. So it has more coercive power. But for the lay people, what coercive power does it have? Very little.
Very good point. Tremendous point. We'll take this as the final one.
Yeah.
How can one become incredible like you two? Brother, I am just a simple sinner. But I'll tell you one thing, the Reverend Dr. Kappes, he is truly incredible. And you want to become incredible like him, you got to read like about 1,000 or more books. I don't know. You got to read all the books that you've read, and I don't think that anyone here, we combine all the books we've read, I don't think they're gonna catch up anytime soon, are they?
Well, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I've actually told people it's always good to do your own research, because I don't think I actually did it this time, but it used to be when I would get on these shows and I would be talking for an hour and a half, I would make a mistake a show, and undoubtedly I would make at least one mistake a show. So you'll
It
notice that,
happens.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I make mistakes too. So
Yeah,
I'm
we all
here in
do.
my I'm here in my capacity, not as a priest. I'm here in my capacity, not as a representative of the church. I'm here in my capacity as a scholar that has read, as William says, a lot of books. And sometimes I don't remember my books well. Sometimes I don't remember my books well. And
Right.
sometimes I have to correct myself, right? So I'm not here as a representative. I'm here as someone who's read a lot of books and is trying to give you the best answer that I can come up with.
And we hope that the answers that were given today were helpful, faithful. We hope they were great. And I see another question snuck in, so we'll tackle it.
All
Daniel,
right.
my friend, how you doing, Daniel? God bless you. Daniel's asking, can I ask of the Greek of the Gospel of St. John 6:40 looks on? The gospel.
Looks on. Okay, let's pull
Looks
it up.
on.
I'm sure you
Let
have
me.
your Greek on hand,
Oh
William.
yeah. Oh yeah. I've always got it. John 6:40. Let me just load up my Bible software. Okay, John 6:40. He's saying for the word looks on. Um, how is it? Okay, let me bring it up. Okay, he's asking for the looks on. Well, here's the Greek. I don't know what he means by looks on, but anyway, here is. And let me put the Greek in a separate.
Yeah, I see
Okay,
some of the Greek here. So 640.
I got it. I put it up on the screen. Here it is.
Tutogar estin to therima tu patrosmo. So for this is the will of my Father, hina or ina, paso theorontontion, everyone who contemplates or thinks on the Son and believes, pistevin, isavton, and believes him, he should have eternal life. And I will raise him, and then you have apparently a contested reading on the last day. So here, this theoron is very interesting. We'd have to see how it's used in John, really, because it has a bit of a range. It can mean to abstractly consider, but it really, the origin of it is to see with the eyes. So to take in, but then to meditate on. So without knowing how John uses the word theoro, I look upon with the eyes and I contemplate or consider. Um, in the rest of the gospel, my first reading here would be something like this. So I can change this, like Vigilius changed when he got more information, or Augustine changed when he had better biblical evidence. Everyone who, I almost wonder, because of the passages here, if this is actually a reference to looking up physically at the serpent on the pole. And this is actually a biblical reference, not a philosophical reference. This is saying, just as the Israelites looked upon the bronze serpent on the pole and they were saved because they believed in the testimony of Moses. So you look upon Jesus on the cross, and when you see him on the pole, believe that he will save you from the bites of the demons, from the serpents, and he will redeem you. That would be my contextual reading, just knowing
That's real
that
good.
from John 3 through this period, we have several references to the lifting up of the Son of Man. In fact, do you have those passages so that we can confirm that I'm giving a contextual reading?
I do, and just let me show you. And I think one other thing that he also is asking about, because it comes up very often when we get the Protestants, once saved, always saved. I believe Daniel's also referring to that, and I think it's a great point.
This is used as a saved passage, huh?
Yes, I believe that is. I think, if I'm correct, he's also asking about that, because we can look at looks, theron. It's a present active participle, and believes. So I think he's referring to the fact that this could be ongoing and continuous, to meaning literally the one who is looking upon the Son and believing in him. But I'm not sure. Maybe Daniel, I don't want to be putting any words into his mouth.
There's not the grammatical forms here are you can translate it as continuously looking upon and continuously believing. So it's not one act, but it's an ongoing series of looking upon and believing. So you can look at it that way, to use a pun. But the other thing here too is it's very difficult for faith alone, because look at the conjunction here. And there's not one thing that saves you here. There are two. Everyone who looks upon, so that's an action, not just a mental judgment, but a physical action. And it's meant to be taken literally, if my context is right, which I know that you're looking for. Yeah. So he first starts talking about the Son of Man and being lifted up. Passages, William?
Yeah, theoron ton, huion kai pistuon. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's a really good point.
3:14 to 15. So this is smack dab in the middle of the discourses of the lifting up of the serpent, the bronze serpent. So between John 3 and John 8, we have right smack in the middle this passage. So I would say this can't be faith alone, because it's saying you actually have to do an action. You have to go to a physical representation of Jesus, which is the seraph. The seraph is the actual word that's being used. A seraph on the bronze seraph, which is on a pole. You have to look upon the seraph, which is a physical image, and then believe after you have done this action of looking. And it's only by a continuous action of looking. And here's where we might get the theoretical. If I were to read more deeply into this theology, everyone believes that John is the theologian. He doesn't mean just looking at it with the eyeballs. He means now I'm meditating on what I have seen. I meditate on Jesus on the cross, which is the fulfillment of the type. And I believe what he accomplished in the cross continually during my life. And then when I've continually meditated upon, and when I've continually believed after meditating, which are two separate actions, all the way until the last day, then I shall be saved. So it sounds like it's actually a whole series of actions during the course of your life. Continual meditation and continual believing. That's how you would try to be literal with it. And so it's not one action believing, it's two actions, believing and looking upon. The looking upon is physical in the type, and it is and what Protestants might be nervous at, because it's an idol in their reading. In ours, it would not. It would maybe be looking upon a representation of Jesus on the cross. That could be a mental meditation, but it also could be, meditating on sacred art. So, because the type was meditating on sacred art. It was a commissioned serpent by God, the guy that was the patron of the artist, and he said, "Make this." They made it, and they looked upon it. So if we are, meditating analogously in the New Testament upon the images of the passion, and then we are believing in our hearts as a result of that, and we continue to do that until the last day, then we shall be saved. That's a lot of stuff going on there. That's not just one act of belief. Once saved,
Right.
always saved. Right?
Yeah, sola fide doesn't work there
Yeah.
at all.
If you would try that, you don't want to use this passage. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go that route. And Sir Minimi, I guess Ari had a question earlier. Sir Minimi sent it saying from Ari, why can't deacons hear confession? And I'll give a simple answer, and then
Go
you
ahead.
want to follow up. I mean, it's very simple because only a validly ordained priest has that faculty to be able to absolve sins, and deacons are not validly ordained priests. So a deacon can preach. They can preach the gospel. They're able to baptize. They can witness to marriages. They can what do you call it? Forgive me. Distribute Holy Communion. I believe. Yeah, and I'm positive they can even they can perform funerals. Right?
Yeah, that's right. They can perform non-Eucharistic funerals, sure.
Gotcha. Non-Eucharistic funerals.
Meaning they don't consecrate it, obviously.
Right. Yeah, they can't consecrate the Eucharist. So I mean, right there, they're not a priest, so they can't consecrate the Eucharist. So deacons are, they're not going to be able to hear your confession, because remember, I think the most important thing is understanding how the sacrament works. That is the number one thing, to understand how the sacrament works. And well, how does it work? It's the minister is acting in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, in persona Christi. And yeah, so that's quite different there. I don't know if there's anything else you'd add there, though.
I would only say that we need to look at when diaconate was invented, and it was invented in Acts, and
Right.
it was invented not to let deacons do tons and tons of stuff. Is that it basically was invented to be assistants at the Eucharistic table, so that the apostles could continue to do everything that they had been doing since Matthew 18:18, when they received jurisdiction to bind and loose sins. So if the apostles, what we would argue here is, one would expect the apostles to tell deacons, you can also bind and loose sins, as in Matthew 18:18, when they gave them this diaconal role. But Acts of the Apostles tells us that the role is very limited. It's only serving people within the context of Eucharistic services, right?
Yep.
So if you look at what a deacon's ministry is, it's especially a Eucharistic service ministry, whether it be the sick, in homes. And then every sacrament is considered, this has always been the case by the Church's theology, every sacrament is considered to have its graces flow from the Eucharist. And in fact, many of the sacraments in the ancient times and in the newly reformed liturgy, as well as in the Eastern liturgies, imitate the Mass. There's a opening, there's a greeting, there's a liturgy of the word, and you can always add a Mass to this. So what the
Right.
deacon, any of the liturgical stuff that the deacon does is an extension of serving at the tables of Eucharist. What you don't have is actually confession, which is attached directly to Eucharist, right? You don't have confession. So what I would just say here is that there's nothing of binding and loosing sins which is particularly ministering at the table of the Lord. Now you may say, well, you have to confess your sins before you go to the table of the Lord, according to St. Paul in Corinthians 11, but he's talking about that outside of the Eucharistic table. It's quite clear that first you confess your sins, and then you approach the table. So if the diaconate is strictly linked to sacramental assistance and not sacramental presiding, and if the thing that the apostles hold in common is jurisdiction to bind and loose sins, then there's a real distinction between the deacon and the apostle. The apostle is one who binds and looses sins, but the deacon is not. And the priest is clearly one who is a delegate of the bishop to bind and loose sins. He is the bishop can remove his faculties to do that in his name. Now you might ask, well, why doesn't he do that? why can't he do that for the deacon? The church has always felt constrained by how the diaconate was formed to be a Eucharistic ministry, not principally a forgiveness of sins ministry.
Great point. That's a really, really good point. And that's historical, always
Mhm.
been that way. Yeah. And I want to give a shout out to our near and dear brother, Lord Jesus Christ reigns, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support, brother. He says, the Lord bless you both, Father Kappes and Brother William. Thank you, my friend. God bless you as well, brother. Great, great photo there, my friend. And thank you for being a tremendous moderator. The brother Daniel, thank you for your support, Daniel. God bless you, my friend. Daniel, thank you for your support. He said, William, I am sorry. I don't want to reduce the will of the Father to believing 1 Thessalonians 5:18, which says, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. 1 Peter 2:15, which says, for this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. And then he says, the reason I'm asking is after using Matthew 7:21, I don't think they can escape that since the Father's will is God's will. Matthew 7:21, great point of connecting all of these, Daniel. Tremendous point, because as Matthew 7:21 says, very good point. Matthew 7:21 says this right here. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. I think that's
So
pretty good.
action is doing,
Yeah,
not
that's pretty
just
good.
not just thinking, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good, because if Jesus says in Matthew 7:21, only those who do the Father's will enter the kingdom, then St. Paul says giving thanks is the will of God. Then Peter says doing good is the will of God. Then I think logically we can conclude that actual actions of obedience, not merely believing, are what matter. Would that be logically follow?
Right. And a real problem, for
Wow.
example, with Lutherans, for Lutherans, I should say,
Yeah.
who try to be very, very technical on these things because they have a very long history and they've had a lot of professors and things like that. They want to try to say that, yes, faith alone is necessary, but they won't allow themselves to say that when I believe, I'm doing anything or even making
Yeah.
an act of the will. You and I say act of the will. So an act of the
Yeah.
will would be, I choose this. I reject that. They don't allow themselves to use that language. They're so overcommitted to faith being something that God sticks in you and you don't get to say yes or no to, that they
Yeah.
have to deny that that is an act of faith. They don't have acts of faith because for them, that means that you cooperate in your own salvation, which is, I mean, it's quite clear that St. Paul has that doctrine, but their Lutheran sensibilities don't allow them to have that doctrine.
Yeah, that's a
So
great,
even
great
for them,
point.
the act of believing is too much action. Now, you'll find probably evangelicals who don't get these points because they're not as disciplined as Lutherans, but Lutherans have a long debate with Catholics over hundreds of years, and so they have to deal with the fact that a psychological action, I believe, is me doing something. So they want to try to bypass even that, which is an act internally to say, I judge this true and I choose it for me to be true.
Yeah. Tremendous, tremendous point. Great, great point. And great connection, Brother Daniel. And thank you for your support as well, my friend. We'll take this final one. And if you want to add anything to it, let me just briefly answer. If you want to follow up anything, let me know. TJ is asking, why can't women be deacons if Hold On Phoebe is called one? This
Why
is
don't we
one that
bring up
gets,
that passage just to make sure that we
yes,
get it contextually?
absolutely. In his first Timothy, let me pull it up. It's 1 Timothy 3:11. And thank you for that's good because we need to
Mhm.
show the context. So here we go. We are in 1 Timothy 3:11. Or is that not the correct one? 1 Timothy 3. I command to our sister Phoebe. Let me see. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. 1 Timothy 3. Mm, hold on, I'll find it right now. Okay. I don't know why I thought it
I
was
think
in
it's
First Timothy.
Romans
I got it.
16:1. Romans
I got it.
16:1.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought it was there. It was in Timothy. I don't know why I thought that. I got it right here. Here it is. I got the USB, ESV, RSV up. Here it is. There we go. Do you want me to pull up the Greek as well?
No, I know it's diakonisa.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought it was First Timothy. You know why I confused it for being First Timothy? I know why. Because my boneheadedness in First Timothy, that's where the ordained diaconate is described, and I confused it there. Yeah. So just briefly, I'll give my thoughts so you can follow up. This comes up very often. This is probably one of the objections we hear often. Now, it does not prove she held the ordained office of a sacramental deacon. So you're going to find in the New Testament, diakonos often simply means servant or minister. Indeed, Paul himself calls himself a diakonoi. He calls himself that. So the idea of this being an ordained office, it has never been recognized as such. And the Council of Nicaea puts that forth as well. Early church history recognizes that. So, yeah, that's what I would say. What does it show you? It shows you clearly that she was very important. She would serve and minister, but she was not an ordained sacramental deacon.
Right. And so we're used to these words being very technical. So deacon, we don't feel it in the English language that it's actually a Greek word.
Right.
Now, it may have been translated through other languages before it went through the Greek, right? So the Latin, etc. But it is originally a Greek word. And for a Greek speaker to hear that word in the first century, they're not hearing special ordained office. They're hearing anyone who does any sort of service. And service sounds like a waiter or a slave. That's not something that a master does. And the Christian oddity is that the leaders of the community do service. Okay. The way that to be a master is to serve everybody else, right? So that's one of the oddities of Christian ministry, is that your job is to rule over the people while you're actually washing their feet and feeding them and taking care of their problems. Like, that's not something that in the ancient world you're supposed to do if you are the ruler. That's a menial work. So really what this means is something like all the people that do the menial work voluntarily and meritoriously, right? So why are deacons called deacons? In Acts, they simply use a Greek word to describe what they establish them as: people who do menial service, but at the altar, at the table of celebration. The difficulty that you get into here is there's no description of Phoebe as someone who does service at the table of celebration. She just does service, right?
Enormous point. Wow.
Yeah. So she's not a table minister. She's just a minister. And that's any number of people can be ministers. The apostles themselves, as William has pointed out, are ministers. So in what way is she doing menial work? Is she doing liturgical menial work? Because in Acts of the Apostles, as Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, the place where you celebrate the body and blood of Christ is the same table at which you're eating at a real meal. So to serve at tables means to serve at Eucharistic gathering tables, where you're eating both food and the Eucharist together, and the poor are also being fed. So you have so which kind of menial labor is the deacon doing? The menial labor is he's probably feeding the poor. He's probably distributing the food at the tables. And he is probably, as the most ancient rules on deacons show, meaning ordained deacons, he's probably distributing also to them the Eucharist from the hands of the bishop. So, so the word itself needs more specification because it's not a technical word in the first century. It becomes technical only after it's associated with what kind of service? Service at the altar. And so what you will not find in ancient documents, which there's Ignatius Press put out a book by a fellow by the name of Marty Mort, a French guy, and it's on deaconesses. And his study as a liturgist on deaconesses can't find evidence in ancient documents, meaning let's say the first 300, 400 years
Wow.
of altar service. He can find household service, running households, meaning domestic homes, but he can't find altar service.
Wow. I got.
And there's also a difference in the way that they are ordained. Some people have
yeah.
a solemn laying on of hands in Greek, and others don't. Female deaconesses, for the most part, don't have the kind of laying on of hands that altar service does.
Tremendous answer. I'm going to have to read that particular study. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah, and I agree. Daniel says, what a beast of the faith. You got that right, Daniel. What a great answer. And TJ says, incredible answer. Well done. Thank you. With that being said, would you be so kind as to close us out with prayer? This was great. This was tremendous, and we'll definitely do it again.
All right. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and always, and forever and ever. Amen. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your listening and your enthusiasm.
God bless you, everybody. We will be back again. See you all soon again. TJ, God bless you. Everyone, God bless you. You all are tremendous. See you again soon.